time presentation. I will now open the floor. I guess Bernd wants to raise some
Very
questions.
briefly, we have arranged that we will talk about your talk tonight.
Yes.
At the dinner. But let me just remark that something about myth of origin. Myth of origin marks a transition between prehistory and history. And what is the result if you have generally acknowledged myth of origin? It produces iterations, and iterations. So we have to look for the original myth of origin of Israel, and that was the Exodus from Egypt. And Moses, the leader, the prophet, leading his people through difficult situations, arriving at the end in Israel, the promised land. The second myth of origin is the exile in Babylon. And you have to go back to this as the core thing. That is, we iterate, and again. And this is an interesting and promising endeavor. In general, we will talk about the details tonight.
Thank you very much.
And I ask for your forgiving because I have to do some purchases. You have to leave. You have to have a beer and a mineral water and so on. I have to do that right now before 6. And therefore I have to leave right now. We will see each other for the club. Thank you.
So, you want to answer to this? You could still answer to us. But
Yeah, I think it's a really great idea. The point of origin of Exodus is indeed very central, and also the Babylonian exile is a great point, and I will for sure take it into consideration. Thank you very much. It's very useful remarks.
okay, I have Anna, Martin, Alisa.
You should have started here.
Julia, has you down? Yeah. All right, I have Anna, Martin, Alisa, Julia, Bernard, and Kai. Okay, Anna, you.
Okay, thank you, Stavit, for your presentation. It's a very interesting project. I really like it. I like the way you approach sociology as a cultural project and then sort of embed it in a national culture and figure out how knowledge is produced with certain aims. Maybe more or less conscious, and that, I suppose, is the question that you need to find out in your research. There are 2 points that, one is that I would like to clarify, the other one is more, point of commentary, maybe question, but more commentary. I thought, well, with Israel you have, of course, a very good case study. To me it's reminiscent also of post-colonial societies where you can also do something like that. As you pointed out, it's kind of a post-crisis situation, a new beginning, and wherever you have these new beginnings you can then approach the production of knowledge. So my question there would be, well, okay, you can apply this nicely to Israel, you can use Eisenstadt as an icon in himself, but probably one could do this for just about every nation and every national knowledge. So my question would be if, as a comparative observation, you would consider, as an X-course, not as kind of as the main part of the work, to look at, I don't know, for example, sociology in the United States. How is that influenced by the national narratives of that country? And then look at one of the other iconic sociological figure. Just as a curiosity, if that would be of any help for you. I think it would be very interesting because it kind of widens the scope. But my question now in terms of clarification is, you started by saying that you had these 2 points of departure, particularly start somewhere in the middle of your presentation. And you mentioned new historicism, which I quite followed, but you also mentioned value-free sociology. I don't understand the concept. I would like you to clarify exactly what that means.
Okay. Should I start then? Okay. Well, first, to add a comparative aspect, it is something I've been thinking about a lot. I don't, if anybody of you have any suggestions which case study would be fitting, I would love to hear that. It is, of course, an important aspect of this work, but it's still in progress. So to Weber's lecture, where he was talking about whether sociology can be value-free. So this is the reference. I recommend it. Yeah.
So it's not something like the school of thought in Israel. That's what I was confused. I thought there was giving historicism and there was value-free sociology, but that's not the case. Value-free sociology is a concept.
There is more point of departure. However, Weber is very central. He's the one that begins to challenge whether sociology can be disconnected from society. What is the limitation of a lecturer? The ethical aspects of sociology, this is things that has been formulated in Weber's account of free sociology. Yeah, so.
Thank you very much. I have an analytic comment and two questions in terms of content. I really enjoyed your presentation. I think it's a wonderful project. I was wondering in terms of the role of Shmuel Eisenstadt as a towering figure and kind of father of Israeli sociology and kind of founding father of the state of Israel. Maybe that is also legitimate to say in terms of in the light of what you're saying. And I was wondering, in three categories, there's a possibility of his being an innovator or a regenerator of the stories of identity of the past. Is there a critical transformation? Is there a creative transformation? Is there a technical application of sociological knowledge to mythical material? So those three levels, maybe we should turn them around. Technical, meaning just we have these myths as intellectuals, we know them, we have them available. Now it's a matter of sociologizing them so that social systems kind of incorporate them so that then they have the effect on the masses. The creative is how do we reconfigure the old past in a way that is adapted to the modern. And then the last level, the critical level, do we have to change this because it's in the light of modernity, some of the things we just don't want to go back to, we want to reformulate in a critical way. So that's the comment. And the questions were just in relation to the danger of anomie that you asked. What anomie was he afraid of? And maybe it has to do with I was interested in hearing more about you were talking about the barrier category in relation to the Arab Jews. What exactly was the issue there?
Okay, thank you, Martin. I will clarify. Anomie, in this context, anomie is understood as social disintegration, which can result in criminality, in just stepping out of society and becoming exterritorial to the mainstream groups. I think Eisenstadt was specifically interested in youth culture. And stealing, not going to school and really creating a social problem. Unemployment, all these things together. This was what he was referring. Now, regarding the barrier category, the Arab Jews, and they are still, this is still valid for today. They are not seen exactly as Arabs, although they are. Some of them speak Arabic. They carry some cultural tradition from Arab lands, still to this day. But they are not exactly Israelis as well, because there is a paradox. The Israelis and Arab are two in the imagined understanding of it's two different paradoxes. It's a paradox to be an Arab and Israeli at the same time. So this is they're exactly this barrier. They're providing this gap which is needed in the construction of this identity, according to my understanding and reading.
Thank you for your talk. It was very interesting to know what happens in other countries with sociology. And the first short comment would be that Russian sociology case would be a quite curious one, I think.
Yeah, the thing is that I don't read Russian.
Yes, that's the problem. And, sorry, we didn't have the time to write anything about Russian sociology in English, but we'll try it next year. So my questions will be, first thing I wanted to clarify, and maybe could elaborate something on this topic. What other approaches and what other like images of society were in the time of early Eisenstadt? So what were the competing views on what Israeli society can be or should be or is? The second question is the fact that we could give ontological status to this yet non-existing group is fascinating. And I wonder how was it possible? I mean, through what means did he convey his ideas, and was it some kind of, was he connected to political events and so on? And the last question is, so how his approach and how his ideas are perceived nowadays? What was the critique of him inside this field of Israeli sociology? Other thoughts that you should go further or abandon his thoughts or try to develop them?
Okay, so thank you. To your question, first there were no other competing understanding, perception approaches. This was a new state. It had one department of sociology. He was the head of it.
Maybe non-scientific. Maybe just popular ideas about it.
This is something that we have to figure out because I don't know. But this was a highly recorded society. There was not much place, according to my understanding, according to the history I studied. There was no much other. There were one group, yes, in Jerusalem, but they were very small. It's called the Allied of Peace. This group, and they kind of preached to different understanding of the Jewish existence, and but I'm talking about a strict hegemony, and I use this not for nothing. This word, it's a harsh word, but I chose to use it. Now, to your second question about the ontological status. To write an academic article is to acknowledge something and to give it status of existence. This is in a way what I talked in the beginning about agency. Now it's very hard for you to show how this agency works because you cannot show it. Very hard to show it. But when an academic in this specific context, instead of using it, is writing an article where he describes the social life of the Arab Jews, social life of communities within this space of Palestine, which is transforming into the state of Israel. The articles who are being published, they have weight. And this shapes an understanding of society. By writing and acknowledging something, you enchant it with a kind of existence. Now, I hope to have answered that. It is a question I'm still struggling with. But how is his ideas are perceived today? Well, Isaac established. But he's a forgotten giant, and at least his early studies seems very old-fashioned, not something we can work with today. This is why I'm taking into historical sources. Nonetheless, Eisenstadt has won the Holzberg Prize. This is perhaps the most prestigious prize an intellectual can achieve. So in the international sphere, he was well acknowledged. In Israel, he was forgotten.
Oh, great. Thank you. It was fascinating, and I wish you all the best with your project. So I wanted to ask you to reflect on some things that we talked about informally amongst us fellows, and that is our own insecurity in terms of career building and how other people before us who became masters were doing that in their day and age. So thinking about the implied reader or the implied audience, what do you think will be the reception of your work? And how do you think it might influence certain kinds of hierarchies? And then also, how do you feel it influences what you're doing? So basically, I guess, given that you understand the context and the various ways in which the context is complex, you know, what kinds of things are you maybe self-censoring in some ways, or, you know, when you're constructing this historiography of sociology in Israel? So how can you feel that you might be trying to be politically correct or being exclusively politically very incorrect, and what kinds of implications you think it will have? So once the world knows your study, you know, how much you will shape the foundations of, you know, this hierarchy, or do you think it will fit right in? Like, how do you make sense of those issues?
Thank you. I think it's a very important question for me and my future specifically.
You know, just to elaborate, because the reason I'm thinking it's very complex is because you are talking not about just his work, but you're talking about his work in context. And by talking about the context, you're exposing certain things that are myths and reality and complications and contradictions.
Yeah. First, I'm sad to say that this work would not be funded in Israel, according to my understanding. Would not be funded. Don't think there were many people who would be willing to supervise that kind of work. Not in Israel. It's a very hard question. I came here so far because I'm really interested in an honest intellectual work. And what I do is I just open the text chronologically and I read the text. And whatever comes up, comes up. I would not rate the text. I would not rate that. Sorry for the metaphor. I'm really engaged in an honest intellectual effort. Whether it will have implications in the future, I don't know. I don't think it should be bothered by it at the moment. But I think it's a wonderful question. I began thinking about it as well. I don't know what the future will bring. And in any case, I think Eisenstadt is very central as a sociologist, and I think his writings are a key text to understanding of the Israeli society, and therefore I think I can establish a kind of understanding that will position me in a place in which I can grow from, within even the academic sphere. So
Yeah, thank you very much for this truly wonderful talk. I would like to first pick up the suggestion of Anna with the comparison, and I think really it's a very good idea. And I would also say that what you suggested, the American society would actually be, and American sociology would actually be a very good comparison. First of all, it saves you also time, because you have to deal with Parsons anyway, because Eisenstadt was a Parsonian, and his kind of modernization theory framework builds up on the Parsons theory. And also Parsons was involved in a sort of reconstruction of American society, and where he was deeply involved in this New Deal politics. And there is a hidden also political undercurrent in Parsons' work. And for another reason, I think it's kind of very useful, because in a certain way, Parsons' sociology kind of seems to reflect certain features of American society. Also about his ideas about societal evolution, growing inclusion, universalization, and so on, which this kind of idea also that towards achievement, not description, a certain also disregard for ethnic identities in many ways, that they should not play a huge role in the workings of society, maybe in family and things like this. And this is quite interesting if you contrast this with the case of Israel, which is kind of follows this Parsonian pattern, but it's founded on a primordial identity and ethnic identity, and how also Eisenstadt deals with this kind of contradiction. And I think, as I understood your project, it's quite interesting that it's about this, about a modernist theory of society, which we have in Parsons as well as in Eisenstadt's theories, and which kind of brackets out also the postmodern developments and the phenomena you were hinting at. For example, the Arab Jew, the paradox. You interpreted it as a necessary gap, but one can also interpret it really as a paradox, which is an expression of this postmodern impurity and the impossibility to gain purity, and something that questions this modernist framework. Another thing, the last thing I would try to bring up is Burns' emphasis on iteration. And I would say yes, but iteration is impossible, at least in this postmodern, from a postmodern point of view. That always the situation is different, and the iteration becomes always different with each iteration. And I think you kind of pointed this out in another detail you gave to us, that the collective effort ban in the Talmud, it doesn't fit with this new iteration of the founding of Israel. And I think it's a very, I think that is part of your project, and I like it, and I hope it is part of your project, to really point out from also this postmodern perspectives, this phenomenon, this in-betweenness, these paradoxes, these impurities, this difference that pops up in this modernist project.
Thank you, Brian. These are very fruitful comments, and I agree with most of them. I like your interpretation of the last point you made. I really like it, and I would definitely think about it and perhaps even adopt it. I think it's a very good point and a very beautiful interpretation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It has been very interesting to hear you. My comments are related to some of the ideas that Julia and Osman have expressed before, and I want to say you congratulations in order to pursue a very risky project and maybe have problems, but for a question of personal honesty, I really believe in that kind of, personal projects. But still, I think that there are things that we can think about, and the idea of I want to tell the truth about text is very interesting, and I support that kind of approach. But still, it always can be understood from a perspective in the idea that you are working on the real code of that sociology. You're making explicit the habitus of the institution for what? What is the idea? What do you want to get?
without making explicit what is foundational and can be said because of that, because it's explicit, it is foundational. So, and that is also related with the idea of the absence of that figure. There is a problem with his memory. Okay, why? You know, why it's important to close that memory in order to pose structuralist crazy things maybe. So what is the relation between the actual academia and the necessity to close that chapter? Why are you going into the dark room in order to do what there? That kind of thinking. So we also can study institutions from the perspective of cultural memory, the history of memory. So that's also interesting. It can be a development of Bourdieu's theory that can be interesting for the project. And a second comment is also related with the idea of the modelization of your product. Is the final result is something that is going to be a model that you can use to study the construction of any kind of sociological institution of knowledge in Europe, in the United States, in Latin America. I don't know. That part is interesting. And also related to that, in globalization time, on networking, international networking, how is that affecting the foundational projects of academia? I mean, do we need still to answer national problems from an academic perspective, or there is transnational issues going on that should be integrated to the institutional narrative? No.
Thank you. I would first like to comment on your comment. You said that I want to tell the truth of the text. I'm definitely not. That's exactly what I don't want to do. I'm actually interested in the validity, the objectivity of the text. I'm interested in the power relations of the text and the project of identity construction. So this is how I do it. The direction of cultural memory, I think it is an important aspect. And this is, Eisenstadt is exactly a source from which we can study of cultural memory, how it established itself, how it's spread itself among social circles. I have to explain. There is the social circle, of course, of the intellectual elite. There is, of course, the professors and then their students, and the sociological studies are in Israel. It's also one of the jobs of the academy is to produce and to supervise texts that high school children are studying. So it goes into wider and wider spheres of society. And I don't know if it's answering exactly your question, but I'm just saying. Will I be able to build a model? I don't know, I haven't thought of it. My background is in modern European history, where I was specifically taught not to assume anything essential. And in this sense, I don't know whether a model can be applied in different cases. It's not one of my attempts, it's not one of my aims, but perhaps I can think about it. And that's about it. This is what I've managed to catch up from your comments. Yes.
Well, like everybody, I'd like to do some money before I come to my questions. Thank you all in between. I think very often it's useful if you can trace back the genealogy of certain concepts and then discover that they are kind of contingent concepts. I mean, even our concept of society has some history, and once you look at the history, it turns out not to be as usual as you were supposed to argue from a kind of academic or scientific position. And also, I think it's very useful to just to paraphrase certain concepts, or put them into different terms to give you a different perspective on them.
Liebe Besucher, wir schließen in wenigen Minuten. Auf Wiedersehen.
This is a library, so as I'm kind of to some extent skeptical with reference to cultural sociology, I'd like to point out some features that I appreciate, at least in the early Eisenstein. And to do so, maybe one should well, come back perhaps to Robert's presentation this morning when he had this idea of crisis, and the response to this crisis was a kind of romantic utopia, and was referring to Schlegel's. I mean, only a few years later, these became, became Catholic reactionaries, and now we are already very close to cultural sociology. I mean, they influenced on their colleagues like Leonard, Cortes, and especially the Nest, strongly influenced Durkheim's notion of how societies are integrated. We have added some other authors. I mean, Denesky was giving apologies for the hangman, and today we, of course, give reference to Bataille, who had a similar notion with reference to purity and social integration. Kind of not really to my taste, but of course, cultural sociology to some extent might depend on this. I mean, Durkheim had this notion that we were talking about homogeneity, that modern society should be integrated by effervescence. And I mean, this was already the wrong option in the French Revolution, as everybody knew, so it kind of surprises me that sociology could start in such lousy ways. And the second idea was, of course, ideas. Society is integrated by ideas, and well, that failed at least in the 20th century in several places. So both of the starting points. One more minute. Okay, well, I have several questions, so give me at least two. There will turn out to be two. Today we've seen, I mean, cultural sociology will end up in a kind of theory of advertising, maybe deliver some semantic weapons for lateral civil wars, as we are very drawn on ideas of collective identity. And I think Eisenstein was up to something more serious. So, and these are 2 points I'd like to emphasize. And first is in his essays on integrating of immigrants, he heavily relied on the notion of relative deprivation, which was elaborated in the American social. So he has the notion of justice. You cannot have a society without justice. I mean, justice is a taboo word in cultural sociology today. And well, he had a kind of, he thought it's important. And the second issue is with reference to homogeneity. I think already the early Eisenstein was not an American melting pot author, but had this idea that different ethnic groups, as they are culturally different, should be integrated or are integrated by having speakers, leaders, intellectuals that somehow allow for the fact that although we have different cultural backgrounds, which are kind of segments, they can nevertheless be integrated as far as they have speakers who can somehow put in charge of organizing their cultural groups. So I think there are two questions which are not covered by sociology today, namely justice and having societies that are not cultural homogeneous, but nevertheless somehow work. So these are commands and questions.
Thank you, Kai. I think that Eisenstein was indeed concerned with the question of justice. I think I've read an article, actually not an article, a written lecture, that is called To the Problem of the Continuity Problems of the Jewish Civilization. Very long title, where he points out that within the Jewish civilization, I personally don't agree with this conceptualization, but nonetheless he uses it, and as a researcher, I'm following his conceptualization and see where it's going. He is very much disturbed by this, and with a sense of civility. So I think we should a bit refrain the question of justice, I think he got more emphasis on civility. He uses this term. This is what I will definitely check that. As you know, this is an ongoing research. It means that I read, and all the time read, and there's a lot to read. It's never-ending reading. So I'm still in the early phase. Since I'm in the early stages of my project, I'm in the early writing of Eisenstadt. And I will see. I think it's an important question to regard and an important aspect. Yes, and I think there is something about this old intellectuals that were concerned more with this specific kind of values, perhaps.
Okay.
It's just a different style, I think. I agree with you. In this sense, it's a different style, but I'm not judgmental. Again, it's not my job to be judgmental.
Yeah, thank you very much for this interesting talk. I have 2 points I would like to make. The first one concerning, already mentioned in this respect. First one commenting on the value-free notion of sociology that Weber actually talks about. Well, as far as I can understand that, it's mostly a methodological notion. I think he's at some point saying explicitly that it's not about that our questions should be free of values because they are reflections on the societies in which we live, but that our methodologies and our outcomes should be free of those values. And therefore, I think it's important to know that it's not talking about if empirically sociology actually value-free, because at this time he had more than enough reason to write this paper just to because it was not value-free at all. So he saw it as a big problem for sociology at this time.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. He was not himself was under political constraints. He was under pressure. Yeah.
Of course, but it's not, the reason is that he was cutting out basically the stuff beforehand. So it can be a bit of a problem because then could be construed, and that's tying into what you said about it's problematic to get some funding for this in Israel because it could be understood as, like going up against the big idol of sociology, or a hidden giant, but a giant nonetheless. So if you say that he was not value-free, you could say that in the sense that he chose his writings or his interpretations which were not methodologically grounded, but rather his comments on that. You see, otherwise you would somehow say that he was not a good sociologist.
No, may I respond?
But my second point, and again, really short, it's only about, the notion already was come up about this comparison that I actually also think that it should be one thing to do. And I would say that you should also compare it to the general discourse during that time in Israel, because we need to have some kind of counter position so that you can see, okay, these ideas are actually coming from that kind of cultural discourse at the time, and this kind of ideas maybe are influenced from sociology in a broader, more international discourse, because it was connected to the American sociology in a very strong fashion.
Okay. First about the value-free question. How should I? I'm not saying that Eisenstadt was not value-free, but I'm not saying that he was. There's a contradiction here, and this contradiction is derived from the fact that none of us is value-free. So I'm not affiliating, I'm not connecting any kind of negative judgment to Eisenstadt. Again, this is not my job. But nonetheless, there is an inherent problem within science, even the natural science, of scientists coming to study materials, and they come with their perceptions, with their beliefs, with their understanding, within the context. And this cannot happen, I believe so. agree to any specific work. And therefore, the reference account is very important because this is not an accusation. This is a question. This is things that I believe that we all as social scientists should take into account. I apply it to myself as well. So this is what I wanted to say. Now, compared to the general discourse, what do you mean exactly? To other academic circles, or
political rhetoric.
Yeah, this is exactly what I'm doing. This is exactly the project. I'm taking the general discourse that is being constructed. It's a discourse in movement all the time because it is being constructed, and I'm seeing how does this interact. This is exactly what I'm doing. It's hard to say at the moment. How do I? Well, for sure I have historical sources. I can show it. I can show the origins of this discourse. But nonetheless, it's still very amorphic. So this is a problem I'm facing. So thank you for clarifying perhaps this point. I should again think about it more, but this is actually what I'm doing. It's not just an inner academic discourse that I'm dealing with.
We have two more. We will read them together.
Yes,
Separately.
I would prefer to take them separately, but for whatever works.
Russ. Thank you. I'll try to make this very brief. Thank you very much for your talk. It's actually going. I want to press Julia's question a little further, and it ties into what has just been said here. So the question, Julia's question was, if I can remember it correctly now. Actually, do you want to word it so I don't have to quote you? You're right here.
Well, I can word a version of that. So essentially it was how the product of your labor might be received because it questions the various inequalities and reasons, pragmatic reasons that academic
Are you trying to be politically, purposely politically correct or purposely politically incorrect? And then within this, there was a question, within your answer to this question, Luciana has just suggested.
Or not just that, but also critical, or you know, purposefully critical or reflective.
But really, what I found intriguing, and this relates to what Jan just said, is you did say that Israel would not fund this project, and then juxtaposed to this comment, you went on to talk about a neutral reading of the text. A neutral reading of the text. Neutral. Or non-raping reading of the text.
Okay, first about the
But I guess, so really, what before anything, you can answer whatever you want in there, but what I'm mainly interested in is why do you say that Israel would not fund this project?
About the political aspect, you asked me whether I'm political. I don't believe that there is a study which is not political. I don't believe there is any type of living existence to go into more philosophical. I think every individual is political in one sense or another, and every social act we are taking is political. Given that this PhD is written within a social framework, it is political. But so do other studies. I mean, in this sense, I wish to deconstruct this question. Now, about neutrality. I have research tools. Again, as I was saying to Julia, I came so far, and I believe I can keep to this point because I'm really truly interested in cite. I give references. I give footnotes. Everything I'm saying is backed up by the text. Now, this is my criticism. It's very important for people to say, hey, no, you are inclining, you are going a bit too far, stick to it. Criticism has, that's why I need to describe here, because I need this feedback. Actually, this whole project was born with my meeting with Bern. Bern told me that he knew Eisenstein. Then I went home and said, hey, why don't you do something about Eisenstein? This is how it's been born. And I actually combined my understanding of Jewish studies and wrote European history all together, and this is what came out. So I hope I answered your questions, but we should speak about it later.
But not the one I want most.
The funding, why don't they fund?
Funding. Funding, why wouldn't it work in Israel? Because inside of the Department of Sociology, inside of the Jewish History Department, these are all people who, people, I don't want to overgeneralize, but the Zionist hegemony is still there. It is receiving more and more critical feedback. Yes, there are more and more critical thinkers in the Israeli academies, such as my former advisor, which has taught me much of, gave me much of my thinking tools to think about the Zionist project. Now, it's getting more and more open and open debate, but nonetheless, there is a strict hegemony of Zionist people, especially maybe less in the classes, in the corridors of the university, but in the people who hold the funds. So this is what I believe. There is no such essay, such research that has been produced in Israel that takes this line. And that's it. And here in Germany I get support. So maybe that was, I wish I would rephrase in a more gentle language. But since we don't have much time, I'm just replying.
Thank you. Can I finally end? Did I forget something? Oh.
Turn the iPad.
Cool.
You should turn the iPad.
You should turn the iPad. No. Do you want to?
I
hate being on camera.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was so slow today.
So, I wanted to talk about the idea of crisis in all of this, which was one of your launching pads, and it's a very simple question, I think. What is it that has formed the crisis that initially triggered your interest, and what was it that made it a valid crisis?
I don't understand. Don't understand the question. Please refrain.
Yeah, so at the beginning of this, you had, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be, it was almost an hour ago now, but I understood that there was a kind of crisis of the Israeli identity, and part of it was that you wanted to explore Eisenstein's work?
No, that wasn't it.
Okay. No, please, correct me, or remind me of the part with the crisis at the beginning there.
This is exactly a stage within identity forms. And it forms out of the Holocaust, in fact. So this is what I was talking about. But the Israeli identity Israel is being imagining itself as a reply to the atrocities of the Second World War. This is what I was referring to. In this sense, each and every cultural phenomenon in Israel to this day can be explained in light of this reaction. I analyzed the Israeli sociology also. This is one aspect. We are talking about crisis, and therefore I suggested this analysis, seeing the Israeli sociology as a post-crisis sociology.
Right. So, okay, cool. I want to still explore this then. The idea of a post-crisis infers, I guess, kind of an end to the crisis before, right? Because you have crisis and then you go beyond crisis, which means you're not still in crisis. And I guess from there, I'm still curious about this idea of the formation of the crisis. At what point it is recognized as a crisis and then it ceases to be crisis, and how, because I think you have a key here with the idea of addressing the hegemony that forms a crisis narrative, but I still would like, I guess, to hear a little more about that formation of and acceptance of a crisis state and a post-crisis state.
Thank you. Okay, but this is a big question. Where does this crisis actually end? In fact, when it ends, when the war ends, it's just the beginning of a different crisis. Within Israel is interacting. It was established in the year 48, just 3 years after the war has ended. During these 3 years, immigrants were floating there to other places as well, to the United States, for example, to other places. Latin America as well. Israel was not the only place. Eisenstadt himself he's also taking part, an actual role within the war that emerged in 48. It is called the War of Independence. The Zionists call it the War of Independence. The refugees of this war call it the Nakba, which means the disaster. So he's taking part of it. And the crisis is undergoing. But I'm referring